The Iowa Property Rights Council is an ad hoc group of citizens around the state who, over the last year, have been concerned about property rights in looking at different initiatives, sustainable communities, different things, and there are inherent threats to property rights in some of those groups. So I heard about it a few months ago because they were talking about the Tomorrow Plan in Des Moines. I went to one of the meetings of the Tomorrow Plan, and it sounds a little flaky to me, not something that I necessarily agree with, so let me dig a little deeper into it. So I got involved getting emails and things like that, not a real activist, but involved. Now, that brings me to where I am. I am a retired businessman. I live in Dallas County in the Raccoon River watershed. And I consider myself an environmentalist. I like to fish, and I hunt with a camera. You know, I've got property that I try and protect and so forth. I went to the Dallas County Supervisors Meeting last Tuesday on a totally different topic. When I was there, one of the supervisors said, "Oh, by the way, we signed a watershed agreement last week." And I said, "Oh, I'd like to see it." That's where this started last Tuesday. They sent me a copy, and I looked at it, and I said, "Well, this is troubling." And so I fired off an email to the supervisors and realized that I said, "Gee, Guthrie County is going to talk about this on Thursday at their meeting. They're prepared to sign something." And I called there and went to speak at their meeting and said, "I found some troubling things in the contract." At the same time, I found out you had a presentation last Monday about this. And so I fired a copy of some of these things to your county attorney, who sent me a note and said, "Hey, that's policy," you know, which I understand. But then I called to get on the agenda. And so what I am saying is a result of my attention to this for the last week. This is not a long-term kind of a thing, and not something I was aware of. Question. I've written a letter to the board. You have a copy of it in front of you. And the bottom line is that you reject the agreement. And the reason that I recommend that you reject the agreement is that as the contract is constructed, you are authorizing the Watershed Authority to exercise all of the power that you have or may have in the future relative to water anywhere in the watershed itself. In addition, they spell out in the contract the ability for them to exercise that power and authority, your power and authority, in support of grants that may come from public or private sources. And we all know that grants have strings. And what they're saying is they can exercise your judgment, your authority, and your power relative to those strings. And as I wrote in my letter, the only ability you have to restrict acceptance of those is the single vote you have on the board. Okay. Now, that was troubling enough for me to raise my hand and say, "Wait, where are we?" I since spent time doing further research. And so I guess on the back of that page is my attachment addendum. I also have, by the way, the contract with my notations so that you can see exactly where this calls out. But I wanted to go through this because it's critically important. There are 5 watershed authorities, maybe 6. One, I haven't found the contract. There are 5 watershed authorities under development currently in Iowa as a result of grants from the DNR and the Iowa Economic Development Fund or others. I read all 5 of those contracts. And as I said, I'm a retired businessman, not an attorney, but I know from my experience that you can steal more with a pen than you can with a gun. And so I look at contracts from the standpoint of who is benefited by the contract. The parties to this contract are the counties. The benefit is exclusively to the new watershed authority. in fact, to the detriment of the counties, as this contract is written. And I believe your attorney will support me in that contention. There are several items that I found. There are, of the 5 watershed agreements, this particular agreement is the only one that has these clauses in it. Okay? None of the others have this. And they are, first of all, it's the only one that has the exercise of power clause that allows the watershed authority to exercise the powers that you have and that have been conveyed to you in all things relative to the watershed. It is the only one that has the power, the authority to act in support of grants, which I spoke about before. Of all the watershed authorities, this is the only one that has that power. Next, there is no provision for dissolution or termination of the authority, and it's the only one that does not have that capability in the contract. So you have no ability to later say, wait a minute, this is not going where we want it. We've got to terminate it, or we've got to dissolve it. So that provision does not exist. The next is, it's the only one that has the ability for the authority to remove a board member from the board for any reason. And you get to appoint board members and they can say, no, that person's off the board. It is the only one that authorizes the board to terminate a member party, which means they can vote to take the county off the authority. That termination, that removal, does not remove the contract authority that you have given them to exercise your power. But they can throw you off the board, and they can throw you out of the group. They have a clause in here, it's the only one that allows amendment of the agreement by the board. Not by you. You have to approve it, but they have the ability to act and amend the agreement. And this is the only one that allows non-government organizations to have voting rights on the board. So what we have is a contract, one of 5, and the only one of 5, that authorizes this watershed authority to be created to usurp, in my terms, the regulatory and power of the elected officials, bring those into, allow them to exercise those authorities within the watershed authority, and with no ability for you or any other elected official to retract those. And they have the ability to bring non-governmental organizations of any kind onto the board at their choice as voting members and throw off the elected officials. So what we then have is a watershed authority that can exercise government power without any accountability to the taxpayers, the voters, or to you. And so when I read this and the contract, and in this I've called out the specific clauses in the contract that support my contention. And the contract that I've attached is the contract that they are presenting and has been signed by Dallas County. And by the way, I've sent this same information to them electronically, and I'm going to speak at their board meeting tomorrow and ask them to rescind the agreement because this is a disaster as it's written. In doing the research, what I found is, because I was told by Pat Bodie, no, that's not the intent. And the reason I was told that, last Thursday I went to the Guthrie County Board of Supervisors and they said, we'll have our attorney look over the contract before we go any further. And they said, why don't you stay for the watershed meeting this afternoon? So I did. And I went to the watershed meeting and I said, here are the concerns. And Pat said, oh, no, that's not the intent. I said, well, I'm not questioning anybody's intent. I'm saying that that's what the words say. And at that time, I didn't have all the other information clearly. As again, I started on this last Tuesday. I didn't have the other information clearly that said they could throw you out of the group, they could throw your board member off the group. You know, It's like, wait a minute, they could take over, and in a matter of a month, throw out all the counties, have the authority, and bring in a bunch of environmental wackos to run the group with your power, exercising your power. I'm not saying that's the intent, but what I am saying is that's the capability. Now, in support of this, and the thing that causes me concern also with this, let me see if I can quickly find this. There has been, in last year, oops, that physics point is going wrong. Last year, there was a working group in March of 2011 at the Hotel Patti of interested parties. And in that discussion, several things were recommended by the working group. And the recommendation was a consensus form of a watershed authority. And they said it should have a tiered board approach, and voting membership should be limited, but should include farmers, non-governmental organizations, and the Des Moines Water Works. But they should be voting members. It also said participating organizations must contribute to funding the organization. Now, in the contract, they have a provision for dues, but they say there's no enforcement. So that, to me, is a throwaway, because what it says is basically you would focus, and I would want you to do as a taxpayer, focus on what's this going to cost me, okay? So you spend a lot of time on that without getting into the weeds on some of the other terms of the agreement. And the terms are the ones that kill you. They also said the priority focus of the group should be on pathogen and nitrogen reduction in the Raccoon River. That's their primary focus based on what the recommendations from the working group were in March of last year. And the panelists cautioned against allowing County Board of Supervisor designees, as they could lack personal interest and cause the group to lose focus. However, there was agreement that at-large appointments could prove valuable. This is the recommendation from the working group in March of 2011. In the fall of 2011, a final, I have it here someplace, the Raccoon River Watershed Water Quality Master Plan was published, and it's a 200-page document. You probably have a copy of it. Okay, great. In there, it says the priority focus of the organization should be pathogen and nitrate reduction, which came from the working group. It said membership on the voting board should be limited in number and include only members living within the watershed. Emphasis should be placed on forming a local, passionate board. This is from the official document. And the organization should carefully weigh the advantages and disadvantages of appointed designees from county boards of supervisors, as these individuals may lack commitment. Now, when I look at a contract that is written exclusively to the benefit of the new watershed authority at the expense of the elected officials, and when I see the recommendations that came out of the working group and that were published in the master plan, which is the basis for forming this watershed authority, to say, let's make sure that we have an activist board, that's how I read it, and we can pick and choose who's on it, independent of what elected officials say. I feel a significant threat to my property rights and to your authority and my representative government, okay? So I'm an environmentalist. I care about the environment, but I care about my liberty more. And I care about the fact that the only reason that I have the time, the money, or the energy to pursue my uh, interests is because of the freedoms afforded to us by our forefathers and by our elected representatives, by the fact that we enshrined our rights of life, liberty, and property in the Declaration of Independence, and the Constitution is designed to protect those, and this document is designed to take those away. It takes away our elected representation, and it takes away our ability to influence what this organization can do. I believe that a watershed authority is probably a good idea, but not under this construct. And so my recommendation is to reject this and let them come up with a better plan. I will recommend a better plan tomorrow to the Dallas County Supervisors, since they were the start of this thing. And I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Very good. Ernie, thank you very much. Before we open it up, I was a little bit remiss in that I didn't introduce or let you be made aware that besides the media that's here, we also have members of the public that have an interest in it. We also have officials from the city of Carroll,
Great.
which, if they so choose, can introduce themselves.
Great.
As well.
Yeah, and I know they're also considering, contemplating membership in this.
Yeah, their mayor and I have had a couple of conversations about it just in the last week, and sort of insinuated they're a little bit following our lead to a certain extent, but yet again at the same time they're certainly going to be free to move ahead or follow your instructions as they see fit.
I'd be happy to answer questions from the board or anyone else if you
And
wish.
We'll open it up here shortly, and then we also have the Farm Bureau is here as well, representing the Carroll County Farm Bureau.
I met Mike. He went to the watershed board last week, Thursday also. So.
And I will, we'll go around and we'll certainly comment and then certainly have some questions. The first thing I want to do is, again, thank you on behalf of the citizens of Carroll County to, help educate this board. None of us pretend to be watershed management experts. And so we've been moving rather cautiously with this whole thing. And we appreciate any and all education that parties can provide. I want to make it clear, however, that we always put a little bit more weight on county residents and their commentary and constituents.
And I certainly expect that, and which is why I'll be at the Dallas County Supervisors Meeting
right.
tomorrow.
Weigh a little heavier on
tomorrow,
that. Yeah, we appreciate it, but at the same time.
But I think it's important.
Yeah,
that
we're
you
mostly
understand.
interested in our county response and feedback that
and you
we
should
hear
be.
too.
Yeah.
I want to ask again, and maybe mostly for my benefit, you kind of made a short introduction again, and you ended by saying you're an environmentalist, but you're more so a libertarian, so to speak. I want to get a little bit better understanding. You said you're a retired business person. By your own commentary, your own opinion, what makes you an expert on this watershed, and what's your particular skill set?
Well, I live in the watershed. Okay, I am an active birder. Active birder. Bird watching.
Oh,
bird watching,
okay.
Birder. I have been for years, and I do that all over the country. I've gone from Florida to Washington State, and from Arizona to Maine, bird watching and traveling and enjoying the wildlife and places that we got. I travel as a fisherman. I fished salmon in New York and Washington, and redfish in Texas and Florida, and stripers off the New Jersey coast, and trout in Wyoming and Colorado and Yellowstone, and I enjoy the environment and so forth. And as I said, I've been able to do that because I have time and money that I've acquired through business and through my capabilities. In my business career, I spent 25 years with IBM, and after that, I had my own business. Okay, in part of the IBM career, one of the responsibilities that I had for several years was in our business practices area, and in that we paid careful attention to contracts and what they meant, and interfaced with attorneys. I'm not an attorney, I said that, but interfaced with attorneys to understand what the contract meant. And I learned there and in my own experience that if you don't pay attention to what the contract says, it can bite you. Okay, so that's the background. So I'm not an expert in the watershed. I am an experienced business person who recognizes detrimental terms in a contract when they're written, and these are clearly detrimental terms. The fact that your authority can be negated entirely by the new entity is unheard of. As a party to the contract, you are giving away in perpetuity any powers you have now or will have in the future. That makes no sense.
And we had some of these very same discussions, which of course you're not the beneficiary of. You weren't here last week. We raised a lot of these same questions and had many of the same concerns. And I'm glad you clarified one of your bullet points about the termination, because I said, well, yeah, there is termination clause in here, but you're making clear that there's no termination of the authority.
That's
the
exactly
party
right.
can terminate at any time.
No, you can withdraw.
But meanwhile, the authority remains in there.
And has the ability contractually to exercise your powers even though you've terminated.
Right. And then one other final question that at least that I would have, unless no one comes up in follow-up, but who are you here representing? Are you here representing Ernie, a resident of the watershed, or are you here to represent Iowa Property Rights Council? Or both?
Both, and I'll tell you why. Iowa Property Rights Council is an ad hoc group, as I said, of citizens that have expressed concern about property rights, and hasn't done anything to be formalized or anything like that. Just talking and sharing information and so forth. I, as I said, became aware of this last Tuesday and said, "Whoops, this is my property, my residents, my supervisors that are being gutted. I'm concerned." Okay, so I'm representing me. But the Property Rights Council, who is in the process of bringing this into a little more focus and becoming more formalized, said, "Fine, you're the director for this operation. Go do this." So I guess I'm representing both, but again, it's primarily my look at it to say, wow. And I wouldn't classify myself as a libertarian, although I do believe in the liberties that we have.
Yeah. Well, I will follow up with another question.
I'm on the Dallas County Republican Central Committee.
So you've seen these other watersheds out there. Have you witnessed what you would deem to be a perfect watershed agreement?
No, but I wrote one, and I'll deliver it to the Dallas County Supervisors tomorrow. I took this agreement and modified it to strengthen the power of the counties and to weaken the power of the watershed authority.
I, for one, would be interested in seeing that.
I do not have it with me.
That's fine.
If you give me an email address or something, I'd be happy to send it. If you have, I know Dallas County's got a single email address that goes to all the board.
Ours are on our website. We have individual.
I didn't find them. I went to the website. I didn't see it. So okay. But I'd be happy to send it, and also to John Worden, because I think you have to have a dirty look at this. But
I've monopolized enough to throw it out for any other board have questions first. We'll put it out to the public.
I guess I've got a comment. I was reading an Omaha paper last week, and kind of on the same note. And Senator Michael Johann was working with EPA on doing flyovers over cattle feedlots.
Yeah.
They have the authority, and this is basically the same on the same note.
absolutely. I mean, you're giving them the power to act as a government without any controls.
What are the flyovers, Marty? Help me with
For cattle feedlots for permits.
Fly drones.
Yeah.
to ensure that they're not overly populated or something?
Well, to make sure they're complying with feedlot regulations.
Okay.
It's on the same note.
Okay.
And his question is whether they are overstepping their boundaries by doing that.
Kind of
And
along the same lines that
he's trying to introduce legislation right now to kind of limit what they can do this coming year.
Question I have now, this 2080 agreement, we under July 1 deadline to sign this or not?
I don't recall that from
Well,
last week, or at
well,
least that wasn't my takeaway.
I raised I'll answer that. I raised the issue of why are we rushing these? What's the rush? Well, we got this grant, we got this June 30th deadline and so forth. And I said, well, you know what? And although this agreement is dated July 31st, so they said, well, we're gonna have to ask for an extension to get it further out. And I'm saying, hey, guys, if it's important to do it right. And I don't care about the deadline. The deadline is an excuse to rush it through. And so I've spent a week scrambling, trying to catch up to something that apparently has been going on for over a year with study groups and plans and this and that, the other thing. And then they come down and lay it out for you and say, well, you got to act now before you have time to understand it. Well, I understand it, and now you do too.
I'm assuming that you read this full report, that it basically was agriculture.
I did not read the whole report, 200 pages, and I went through it and looked for the specifics relative to the watershed authority. Okay, and so that was the piece that I focused on, because the watershed authority is what I was focused on here. There are a lot of details in there that I'm sure the Farm Bureau understands better than I do about, you know, how best practices and so forth, and I know that we do a lot of those things. But I look specifically at the watershed authority and their recommendations, and that's where I got these comments.
And that's why I said, I've read the thing twice, you know, and I don't see where we're reinventing the wheel anyway. You know, I think it's the same thing we're doing this. We're doing this through soil and water conservation. We're doing it through different conservation groups. You know, best management practices. I don't really see anything new in that. You know, and the way it was presented to us last week, we want to get in this to better our grant opportunities to do things, whether it be with the city of Carroll, whether it be with the county level. I'm sorry, I just don't see rushing into this right away. I don't see anything new, anything better. We're doing the same thing. We're repetitive. I asked her that question, and it came to the financial support. She answered my question by saying we'll have a better, stronger power of receiving this grant.
The argument is, I'm going to give you some candy, and boy, you better do this because you want the candy. And we all know where that goes, because those grants come with strings, and the way this is written, they can be implemented whether you object or not. And that is the problem, because we have taken, in this contract, we have taken the rights of the elected officials and pushed them aside with no ability to get them back. Just nothing that I would support in any way, shape, or form. And if I were a party to the contract and I had paid an attorney to write it and they wrote me out of it, I'd sue them for malpractice. I mean, it's just that bad. It's that bad.
I'm kind of out of the loop here. Not here last week when this was presented. Have we forwarded this to John?
Yes.
Has he had a chance to look at it since?
He has not commented.
What Ernie's?
Yeah,
And I think that's.
He does not have all of this information. The what I had sent him was just a couple of notes I sent by email, and he said that's a policy issue for the board. And I said, I understand, but
Well,
I know they're going to
I
ask.
forwarded this information to him.
As a board, I think we need to.
This morning?
Friday.
Okay, no, you haven't had this. No, my information.
Your,
You said.
No, my comment-
on the comments on the 2080, no. But
My comments relative to the 2080 and calling out the specific paragraphs and the concerns with them, I had not provided that to anyone until this morning.
The clauses?
My clauses, yeah.
I had it Friday.
No, I didn't create them, so I don't know where you got them.
Republican
No.
Central Committee.
Did I get them from you? I know I got some that's.
They didn't have me. I mean, this is my work product. I wrote them. I didn't give them to anybody. You're getting them for the first time right now. No. The article, the 28E, you have, but no, the specific
comments here on the side.
The specific comments that I have on the back, the specific comments on the back of the,
On the 2080.
I don't know where you got
This
that.
I got Friday.
That was a partial document